South Korea is poised to join the World Government Bond Index next November, marking a remarkable milestone in boosting foreign investment and bolstering market credibility. On Press Perspective today, we touch upon this event and its broader implications. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective, our daily panel session with members of the media as well as relevant pundits on issues of interest largely pertaining to South Korea. Today we address Korea's acceptance into the World Government Bond Index starting November next year after several previous attempts. For this, I have Daniel Moss, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, live on the line. Daniel, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to be here.
I also have Professor Song Soo-young at Chung-Ang University, live on the line as well. Professor Song, welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it for having me here in this moment.
Right. Well then, Daniel, let's dive right in. What makes this inclusion so important for South Korea?
This is a very significant step toward greater integration of South Korea into global capital markets. It's already been integrated to some degree, but this raises the game a notch. To be sure, it raises the stakes. But in an environment where interest rates are falling, where you have aging societies worldwide, we know all about that in Korea, more and more investors, pension funds are looking for long-term fixed income investments. Anything that makes Korean debt more attractive to more people has got to be a good thing.
Right, Daniel, the government here also for its part claims that as much as 90 trillion won can be lured into the local bond market in light of this inclusion. Do you share this optimistic outlook?
Well, I wouldn't want to get into handicapping specific numbers. Global capital flows can be influenced by any one of a number of things at different times. Certainly, it enhances the potential for greater foreign investment in South Korea's bond market. Look, Korea is the world's 10th largest economy. This is only natural.
Professor Song, Korea is poised to join the World Government Bond Index next November after several previous attempts, of course. What efforts were made by the government here to perhaps raise its chances of being included in this selective club, if you will?
Yeah, since listed in the watching list for the accessibility to the bond market at the level 2 at the Russell Global Index. So it is very important for Korean government and Korean countries. Bond is included in such important one of the 3 major indexes in worldwide. So I would like to say the initiatives has been made by the government about some removed or reduced or lifted some very regulation over the foreign exchange market and allow the foreign institutions to participate directly in foreign exchange, as well as some allow the omnibus account, which rely on the transaction of the bond through the Euroclear and some other institutions, international, some depositories are also available. And also some registration for the foreign investors are not anymore necessary, and also extend the operating hour for the foreign exchange market. So to that regard, with the help of those lifting of the regulation, and then eventually the Russell announces that in September, contrary to the expectation by JP Morgan or other some Goldman Sachs expectation to be Korean market would be included in the next year. But however, this is clearly good news. But however, I always emphasize that when there is a bright side, some gray or dark side always accompanied. So that's my concern about that.
Right. Daniel, as Professor Song mentioned, there were some pundits who claimed that South Korea's inclusion this time around came as a bit of a surprise. What are your thoughts?
The surprise is in the timing, Sun-hee, rather than the fact that it was incorporated. My colleagues at Bloomberg News spoke to a strategist at Goldman Sachs who was thinking maybe this is something that would have to wait for next year. It's come sooner than that. It's great. I don't think anyone thought Korea could be shut out of this forever. So, this is a question of degree rather than substance.
Right, I see. Professor Song, there is concern that Korea's inclusion to the World Government Bond Index also leaves the country vulnerable to global market fluctuations. How do you respond to these concerns, Professor?
Yeah, particularly when there's some outflow, sudden outflow of the capital from foreign capitals could have some impact on the Korean economy and could deliver or exaggerate some negative news for Korean economy, could be spread out much fastly. But as long as I'm concerned that Korean government bonds are treated as a very reliable one, contrary to the Korea discount, because Korea discount always has been existed for the last several decades, right in the capital market, not in the stock market, not just in the bond market, because Korean government bonds, currency stabilization bonds, are treated very stable and safe assets. To that regards, the inclusion of the Korean government bonds into this index, clearly good news. But however, what is dark side could be some tax exemption, because we don't know, because these the omnibus accounts, the investors are not necessarily identified. So that's why my concern lies in that there is a clear some loss of potential capital gain taxation for the government. However, as long as the foreign capital flows into the Korean bond market and that could reduce the yield, that means our Korean government or Bank of Korea could have a room to reduce further the interest rate to help foster the economy to recover in the current situation. So that is a kind of some trade-off relationship, but clearly, I hope it works well for the Korean economy.
Right, and those hopes, I'm sure, being shared by quite a number of people here. Daniel, Mr. Moss, I'd also like to extend the same question to you. How do you respond to concerns here within the country that that the joining of that index would expose the country to much fluctuations?
Korea is already integrated intimately in the global economy in the manufacturing space. Korea was one of the winners from the work from home era, for example. It has any one of a number of global brands operating from autos to computer chips to shipping. It's already integrated. Now, as far as capital markets are concerned, we saw during difficult stages of COVID, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic when there was a rush for dollars worldwide, the Korean won was under stress. And the government intervened, as did ministries of finance in many countries. So the idea that somehow without this, Korea is totally insulated and shut off, that's an illusion.
Right, so not a cause for concern then. Professor Song, moving forward, Samsung Electronics, it recently offered a very rare apology for weaker than expected profits. Now, keeping that in mind, do you suppose we need to be worried? I mean, South Korea is a country that is driven by exports, especially of those of its cars and chips.
I hope Korean economy is not affected too much because of some staggering performance of the Samsung semiconductor company, Samsung Electronics. Particularly, of course, I cannot but admit that our economy relies too much on the Samsung or some big conglomerates such as Jabil's. But recently, the reason why the Samsung made an apology for the lower level of earnings than expectation is because they have not only failed to lead the semiconductor market, and they fall behind some development of the HBM3E semiconductor, and they are not qualified for selling their products, their semiconductors, to the top level of the clients, such as Apple, Qualcomm, or NVIDIA. So to that regard, and also another aspect is because of the huge development in the high quality semiconductor developed by the China. So that is, Samsung is like falling into a situation like a sandwich, because they are fall behind the leader, and then the follower, who is a challenger or competitor to the Samsung, has been approached. So that's why the Samsung is so concerned about the current situation.
Right,
that's why that is the background for the apology to appear.
Right then. Beyond the corporate sector then, Daniel, you recently covered the Bank of Korea's cutting of its benchmark interest rate, and adding that Korea has, and I quote your title, Korea has earned a victory lap on rates. Do you care to elaborate, Daniel?
Yeah, Sun-hee, you've got to go back to August 2021, when the word delta was on everybody's minds. The Bank of Korea had the foresight and the courage to lift their main interest rate when no one else was really coming close. The Fed would not lift off until March of the following year. Jay Powell still liked using the word transitory. So this was a move that the BOK conducted with great foresight. The other very hawkish Asian central bank at that point, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, was scheduled to lift its interest rate at the same time. But they had one COVID case and it shut down the entire nation. No more rate cut in August, which left the BOK as a hero. So now here we are, inflation snuck back below the 2% target. This was an easy win for the BOK. A very easy decision. Could it have come earlier? Yeah, possibly. But, you know, people talk about the Fed kicking off the global rate cycle. Well, let's go back. You know, South Korea was first, you know, and now they're reducing. It's definitely a moment, you know, in recent global monetary history. That was the point I was trying to make.
Right. Professor Song, as Daniel just mentioned, here in Korea also there is quite a bit of debate about the timing of the rate cut by Seoul Central Bank, with quite a number of people arguing it should have taken place sooner. Where do you stand on this debate, Professor Song?
Yeah, clearly Mr. Moss has mentioned earlier that Bank of Korea was a hero at the stage of the increasing interest rate. But in the following, as the inflation subdued, and then the Korea is the last, maybe, I think it's quite late for them to lower the interest rate, because Switzerland and other countries, including US, and so many countries that are very concerned about the economy. Clearly, Korean economy is performance, because Korean economy dichotomous, because top conglomerates such as Hyundai and Samsung has performed relatively well, but however, domestic economy suffered so much, particularly because of the high interest rate, that could have a really impact on the working capital for the smaller and the medium-sized enterprises. So my concern is the Bank of Korea should not too much worry about some property market, some increase or property market development, because that is, even with the property market problem, still the economy need to grow first. Then it will be resolved for the property market problem.
Right. And beyond Korea, Daniel, we have a few minutes left before the end of this program. I'm going to use that to ask you an impromptu question or two. Keeping in mind the current geopolitical uncertainties faced by the globe, what is your assessment of the current global economy? I understand that's a tough question to answer in a few minutes, but what are your thoughts, Daniel?
So the two biggest drivers in the last couple of decades of the health of the global economy have been a US economy that's doing well, interest rates are coming down, and a Chinese economy that is doing pretty well and where officials are committed to stoking growth. Now, there's a widespread perception that China's economy has underperformed recently, a perception I share in many ways. But the big signal being sent by authorities in Beijing in the past couple of weeks is they recognize there's a problem and they're taking steps to prop up their economy. So you've got interest rates coming down in the US and no recession, touch wood. We have the Chinese authorities looking to put a floor under their slowdown. Historically, these two forces have been great for emerging markets. So in that sense, it's reasonably positive. The critical thing is, China can't just stop now. They've sent some relatively bullish signals about their preparedness to stimulate the economy. They can't go half-hearted now. They've got to follow through with really substantive steps, particularly on fiscal policy.
Do you suppose, Daniel, that Beijing is doing all it can to better address its real estate market?
I think there's an element of trial and error involved in this, as there was in the United States from 2007 to 2009. Authorities tried several things. So China's going to have to experiment a bit here. It doesn't matter so much whether any one individual policy is the perfect thing. What matters is they keep trying something, and eventually something will click, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a slog. People look back on the subprime crisis that began in 2007. Arguably that didn't end until at some point in mid-2009. So China has a ways to go here. It's a hard slog. One thing people do need to remember is the China of, the late 90s and the early aughts, where economic growth was double-digit or approaching that per year. That's not going to come back. But, maybe we can come back to confidently talking about a growth path where China is not continually disappointing.
Right. Right. Well, on that note, we'll end this session. Daniel, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Song, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in again same time tomorrow for our session on how age can only be a number in a silver society.